leg. The most renowned and widely performed ballet in history. It's ballet, it's drama, it's art. In 1877, critics hailed it as right and an embarrassment. The Nutcracker, the family favorite that's kept audiences entertained the world over. The splendor, the beauty, the excitement. Is it any wonder that in 1891 the critics wrote, "The production of such spectacles on our stage is an insult." And The Sleeping Beauty, the Tchaikovsky classic that rescued dance from the dead, advanced choreography, and ushered in a new explosive age in ballet. The Tsar of Russia dismissed it with a sarcastic,
"Very nice." Difficult as it may be to believe, Sleeping Beauty, the ballet the Tsar dismissed with an indifferent, "Very nice," was originally choreographed using small figures similar to these. In The Sleeping Beauty, a baby princess Aurora is condemned at her christening by an evil fairy Caraboss to prick her finger and die on her 16th birthday. But a good lilac fairy steps forth and declares that the princess will only sleep until awakened by the kiss of a prince. Act 2 takes place in a neighboring kingdom 100 years later, where the lilac fairy offers a prince a vision of Aurora. Enchanted by her beauty, the prince travels to the castle where the princess lies asleep. He approaches the canopied bed and plants the awakening kiss. The final act ushers us into a sumptuous hall for the royal wedding of Prince Charming and Princess Aurora, where a full series of celebratory dances are performed. These were the tools of the great choreographer Marius Petipa, who choreographed The Sleeping Beauty for the Imperial Ballet of Russia. A stickler for detail, Petipa would spend countless hours fashioning different groupings with these figures, writing the successful ones down in a notebook. And to hear dancers tell it, that notebook must have been full.
Excites me. When I was 12 years old and I heard Sleeping Beauty, I was already in a fantasy world because it's all right there.
But what a wonderfully rewarding role that is. I think it was probably the one, though, that technically as a dancer I was the least suited to. And really did have to find a mind over matter in terms of energy to keep pumping out that physicality to that magnitude.
Sense for the leading dancers is all about striving. It's all about being an incredibly superb athlete and doing your decathlon, doing one hurdle after another, after another, after another, with the appearance of effortlessness. and then at the same time having a majesty.
With the choreographic excesses of Petipa's The Sleeping Beauty, ballet had come full circle. When the Romantic era ended in Western Europe, ballet was in decline. French ballet masters migrated to Russia, where the political system that had existed in France before the French Revolution still thrived. Now, these choreographers, who had always been acclaimed in Russia, would have monetary and human resources at their disposal, the likes of which had not been seen in Western Europe in years. With the French defections to Tsarist Russia, ballet was once again an entertainment of the court. This throwback became known as the Age of Classicism.
We're dealing with ballets which emerge from an extraordinarily class-ridden, aristocratic society. After all, those ballets of Tchaikovsky's were created in the context of an imperial court. They reflected the values of a society which emphasized class distinctions. The audience itself was divided, even physically within the theater, according to where they sat, as to whether they were aristocracy, whether they were rich merchants, or whether they were parvenus, the nouveau riche. I mean, there were even physical distinctions. I mean, they weren't enforced exactly, but they existed. So the ballets themselves reflect the values of the time and the grandeur and magnificence of an imperial society.
As a result of this throwback, many of the conventions of ballet that had been discarded by the Romantics were reincorporated. Divertissements, for example, those little dances that suddenly spring up for no particular reason, made a triumphant return. Dances sprang up everywhere, from ensembles to solos to corps dances. But in reverting to an earlier, more excessive style, plot became but a framework, and the ability to portray character, which had become so much part of dance during the Romantic period, became less important.
Quite frankly, I get irritated that the story gets often very lost. The story doesn't get lost in Giselle. The story can get a bit lost in Swan Lake, although, you know, the thread is pretty. But in Sleeping Beauty, there's so many divertissements. There's so many excuses just to put dances in that after a while you kind of go, well, what happened to the story? Like, you know, what's going on in sort of a human way? And that isn't really addressed in Sleeping Beauty. So it makes it even more difficult to bring sort of human emotions to it. It is possible, but it makes it even more difficult. Because every time you begin to feel something human, or you begin to understand the storyline in Sleeping Beauty, suddenly there's a couple of pussycats doing a variation, or bluebirds, and, you know, it's sort of, why?
This isn't to say that the principal roles in The Sleeping Beauty aren't without weight. Princess Aurora, for example, still undergoes an interesting transformation.
It seems everyone says, oh, it's so shallow. I look at it and say, but there are three distinctly different ways to approach each act and the way that you dance them. But I find there are three distinct acts, and I approach the first one as though she's a 16-year-old, fresh, young, alive, excited, naive princess. Of course, she's a fairy princess, so of course the elements that go into the character aren't like a normal girl, but she still basically has elements of being a very normal girl. And even though she's a princess, she's still a girl. And she's in this courtyard, and she's excited it's her birthday, and she's happened to live in splendor and luxury all her life, but it's still her playground. And in the second act, she's definitely a vision. She's a vision. So it's a much the way that even though she's a princess and she looks the same, the way that she moves has to be in a much more ethereal way. And then in the third act, I find that it's a very subtle difference. She's still a princess, but what she is for me is that she has the girth or the weight of responsibility put on her shoulders. She's no longer just the young, carefree princess, but she's a young, blushing bride. And she's basically become a young woman. She's not a queen yet, She's not a woman in the sense of her mother standing there on the throne, but she has a sense of maturity and a sense of responsibility about her.
Though the role of Prince Charming is equally limited, it too is not without its personality.
It is pure classicism.
Just
you know?
hard, yeah.
Pure classicism. And therefore, to some degree, you're the most naked because it's you out there. It's not Siegfried the character. It's not Albrecht the character. It's you and your training and your view of the theater in a representational way.
And though the prince didn't get his own variation for years, over time the role has become increasingly physical.
It's probably one of the most demanding technical ballets for the male dancer. We know very well that that third act variation, when it's really well executed and when it's properly executed with its double manège, as we call it, the double circle, not the cut version, but the real full version musically, can be perhaps one of the most challenging variations for a male dancer. I always found that particular variation in my career the most challenging one.
How I wished I could have done that on stage. But the idea is not to show exertion. Stamina is what Petipa's The Sleeping Beauty is all about. No other ballet features as many choreographic showpieces as this one. The first, and most anticipated, is the one in which the princess dances with 4 prospective suitors. It is known as the Rose Adage.
Nothing makes me as nervous, always, ever since I first started doing it till probably whenever I stop. The balances of the Rose Adagio, I think. Mainly the musical build-up is so tremendous, particularly for the last ones. They don't go the way I want them to go. I feel like I've not only let myself down, I've let the music down almost. You know, it's like I have to live up to this music.
Ah, yes, the music. Where there is such vibrant physicality, there is usually a rich and inspiring score. Just as responsible for the grace, majesty, and excitement of The Sleeping Beauty as Petipa is its composer, Tchaikovsky.
Tchaikovsky's genius cannot be overestimated here because it's a tragedy that he died thinking his ballets were abject failures when in fact they truly are the reason that they live. He cut to the core of human emotion and the simplicity of the arrival of his music, the fact that it appears to be not complex is in fact a great tribute to his abilities. And the music continues to inspire audiences and dancers.
On The Sleeping Beauty, Petipa and Tchaikovsky broke with precedent and worked in very close collaboration.
And this was not at all uncommon. It simply fits in with the notion of the composer not being some sacrosanct thing who couldn't be touched, but the musical score being something that had to serve the needs of the choreography. So if the composer has delivered a score which, because of the evolution of the choreography as it's been created, doesn't quite work, then it's going to be the musical score that is changed, not the choreography. And that exactly happened. And Tchaikovsky was quite used to that idea. I mean, he didn't put up a lot of fuss about it. Occasionally he'd stick his heels in, but generally speaking, he recognized what his job was. And he worked with remarkable harmony with Petipa in terms of satisfying Petipa's needs for very precise dances of certain rhythmic structures, certain lengths, certain interludes of music, creating certain moods, and so on. He was very much willing to serve the needs of ballet in that way.
This Tchaikovsky did brilliantly, especially in the last act, where Petipa had created a showpiece for a male dancer, the Bluebird Pas de Deux.
I think that the style for Bluebird also is quite a challenge, because to have the strength in the legs to bounce, really you need a ballon to do that variation, and to have the beats, the footwork, and maintain the upper body soft and feather-like. That's quite a challenge.
Говорит о счастье, о любви в окружении.
Pas in the last act is an amazing moment also. It's about love, but it's not about love in the manner, for instance, of Romeo and Juliet, when Juliet runs and throws herself on Romeo's neck. It's about love within the circle of the court, when she constantly must bow to her prince, as well as show him that she loves him.
These two moments are considered among the most difficult in all of ballet, but perhaps the most difficult choreography is between dancer and conductor.
I think there's a great mutual trust between dancer and the conductor, or between the dancer's art and the musical art that's happening. There has to be that kind of partnership. As you say, there may be a pas de trois. There are three of them up on stage, but believe me, it's a pas de quatre. The music is part of it, always.
You asked me an interesting question. What do I demand, or what do I need from conductors? And you know, it's and I felt it on many an occasion. And it's, for me, it's a gift. You know, when we have that, it's a kind of ESP. It's a kind of connection, a visceral connection that I get, where I know that even if a conductor starts off something not quite right, he senses that it's not quite right, and he adjusts as he's conducting, and he comes into sort of sync with my dancing, with my feeling about the music. And it's not that I gave him the eyeball, or that that he sensed I was having trouble. It's just that he's, on some level, he's communicating with me, and he's understanding how I am breathing and how I'm feeling this music as I'm dancing to it. And then, then magic can happen.
Fact is, the conductor and the dancer are constantly trying to adjust to each other throughout an entire performance.
Take, for example, let's say, little dance from Sleeping Beauty that everybody loves so much. Now, let's assume that the tempo, correct tempo, musically speaking, would be. And the dancers just could not manage that tempo. It was just impractical. So I would have to bring that tempo down, and I would have to find a different way of accenting the notes. So I would play with the notes a little more and give little accents, let's say. I would exaggerate the quality of lyricism, or the quality or the dynamic, to make up for the fact that it was a bit slower.
Sounds good, but it isn't that easy to do.
Oh, conductor can kill you.
The conductor can kill you.
See what I mean?
I think conductor should know the choreography. And he should know the movements, you know.
It's extremely important.
And go, of course he has to keep his symphonic, you know, what, the sense. But this particular music was written for dancing, you know.
Yes, that's true.
And if it's very good conductor, if I ask stretch some phrases, he will do very musically, not just suddenly. I mean, some conductor more sensitive than others.
One conductor who he thought he had it all together, he came to rehearsal with a pocket metronome. And he conducted the whole thing like this. Well, he must have done it to, you know, somebody's tarantella. Must have gotten confused. And he just raced through, and I mean, I think I had to cut out half of the steps, and and you couldn't get his attention because he was looking down at the metronome. And that's probably about the only time that I kind of lost it. I don't remember. I got pretty angry. I think I even surprised myself.
I find that the best way is to always try to dance to the music. In your training, sometimes the tempo is a little uncomfortable for you. What are you going to do? In front of 3,500 people, maybe more? You're going to sink? No way. You have to do it. There's no question. You cannot not survive it. You have to survive it. So you're ready for that. But we are able to stretch it this much or that much. If we have to stretch it more, then we don't dance with the music. We make, in a way, a compromise.
So the question remains. With its memorable score, its choreographic pyrotechnics, and its sheer visual opulence, why did the Tsar, for whom the ballet was fashioned, simply dismiss the Sleeping Beauty with a haughty, very nice?
Critics, whether they're the Tsar of Russia or a journalist, are only witnesses to something, and they bring to the task their own taste. And anytime someone does something new, he's in danger from a critic, because we've lived with the past, and we're now confronted by the future. And not many of us have very good crystal balls. And the temptation is to hit the choreographer over the head with what he hasn't done that has been done before, rather than to open our perceptions to what's new. So it usually takes time. Any critic wants to be made excited and to have the whole experience of a traditional work brought back to life again. We, in our best moments, are perpetual virgins. And if we can keep that sense of going there for the first, as if it were for the first time, to rediscover the ballet again, that's a wonderful feeling. And any artist who can give that to us is a special artist.
The Sleeping Beauty continues to search for a place in critics' hearts, but the public has never fallen out of love with it. The sheer artistry and entertainment value of its solos, processions, and adagios is as overwhelming today as it was 100 years ago.